section of this meetup, and then I'll stop recording once we break into the discussion group. So without further ado, we are so excited to welcome our guest speaker today. Neil Wengerd is the creative director at Nonfiction, and I love that name. It's a brand and design agency based in Worthington, just outside of Columbus. He's working on some really exciting things over at Nonfiction and has graciously agreed to chat with us today about some key branding strategies and resources. So Neil, take it away.
Thanks, Karen. I am super excited to share knowledge with everybody today. And one of the things that I heard was on everybody's mind was brand strategy, specifically how to create it, how to share it with your team, how to come into a new company and create something that doesn't exist yet, and then share that with your team. So I thought what I would do today is walk through, first of all, what is a brand strategy? Why does it matter? Which hopefully probably will be review for a lot of people on the call, but might also offer some insights and refreshers to some people. And then I want to talk a little bit about what I see as the core elements of a good brand strategy, sort of the minimum viable brand strategy that you need to get it up and running. And then I've got an exercise that we found useful when we work with clients, but you might also find useful when you're working internally on how to create that highest level of brand strategy, which is sort of that purpose positioning level. So I'll walk through that with you, and then there's a couple of resources at the end that I can share as well. We've done that, so I will skip that page. And if anybody has any questions at any time, just raise a hand or jump in. Maybe Karen, Nicole, you can flag me down if I miss something, but it's all a discussion here. This is not a presentation to you. Just we can have a conversation about any of this at any time. But the first point here is, what's brand strategy? Why should we care? And there's 4 points that I think that we talk about when we talk with clients about why creating brand strategy is the place to start when we're doing branding. We can't just jump into design and the pretty things. We need to start with the left brain thinking. And the most important thing that we talk about is that it creates a North Star for all company decisions. It's not just marketing, it's not just your design, but it's what products are you creating, what's your customer journey, and how do you interact with them at any given point, and what do you go back to when you're trying to make a decision about anything. It gives you something to constantly ground yourself in when you're trying to decide what the future of your product or your company is. And ideally, this North Star doesn't change. So this is why you get out of bed in the morning, and this is what everything goes back to. So you can always ground yourself in that when you're trying to decide decisions or pivot or anything like that. The second point is that it rallies your whole team around a common cause. It gets everybody reminded of that North Star, and it gets everybody on the same page when you're coming to work and working quickly, working on a deadline, working in whatever ways that your team works. It reminds everybody, oh, this is what we're doing and this is why we're here, when you get bogged down in the details of day-to-day work. And so it gives everybody a place to come back to, and your morning stand-up, your weekly stand-up, however you do it, you can sort of remind everybody of that. And similar to the last one, where the last one was more of an internal rallying cry, this is about getting everybody on the same page when you're speaking externally, as far as who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And this gets everybody singing from the same playbook, and being consistent in the way that you're speaking to your customers, your clients, your audiences, whomever. And that makes it really easy to not reinvent the wheel every time you need to send an email or create a white paper or do a social media post. It allows you to go back to your brand strategy and say, oh yeah, this is our talking point. This is what we say when someone asks who are we and what we're doing. And then it gets more detailed from there. But that core message, the old Simon Sinek golden circle example, it really is that simple in some ways. Hard to create, simple diagram, hard to create, but having everybody on the same page is great. And then we've got clients that hang up their brand strategy by all their desks, and they just have it by them and they internalize it every day. And then the last point, once you've done that, once you've got everybody on the same page, is giving everybody in your audience something to connect to emotionally and rationally. And this is this goes hand in hand with the creative work, because the creative work is an expression of your brand strategy, the way you design something, the way you write something, what your marketing tactics look like. But if you think about the best brands, I have a hunch you are connected to them more emotionally than rationally. You might think that you're buying something because it's good value, or they make a great superior product, but at the core, I would suspect that you're connecting with them on a more emotional level than that. I know I certainly do. The things that I buy, I tell myself, oh, I'm buying it because it's a good deal or a great product, but really I'm buying it because it's aspirational for me. It ties into a lifestyle that I see myself being part of. The brand stands for something that I believe in. So there's something that is emotional to that, and you've got to pair those things. And so a good brand strategy puts all the functional things out there about quality, superiority, what makes your product great, but also here's what you can connect to on an emotional level. And we'll touch on that next too. So that's a really broad, quick 50,000 foot view of why we see brand strategy as being important. What great brand strategy includes for us is three things. So there's, you can get 50-page brand strategy documents. For us, we can usually boil that down to one page that we'll use on a day-to-day basis, which is what's your purpose, what is your positioning, and what's your brand personality. And then all of the rest of it, your messaging, your audience segmentation, all of that comes from that. So number one, what's your purpose? What's the change you want to see in the world? Doesn't matter what your financial gain is or what you're doing, but your purpose is why you're here in the first place. And so that's what you started the company for. It's what your company's mission is. So if you think about the classic brand purpose example of when Microsoft was founded by Bill Gates and the other guy, I don't know the other guy's name. I'm sure he's mad. They wanted to put a computer on every desk in every home, which is a great, that's a very tangible thing to bite off. You can visualize it, you can envision it. If you think about a company like Patagonia, they are in business to save the planet. Everything that they're doing is trying to go against the grain of other businesses in some ways and do things differently in order to have a planet that is sustainable and thriving. If you think about Nike, their whole purpose is about inspiring athletes. The whole greatness campaign is about that. Whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're a guy like me that might run 3 miles a couple times a week, they want to inspire you to be your best. And if you think about even a company like Crayola, which is, I've got 2 little kids, so Crayolas are all over the place. Their whole purpose is to inspire originality in children. And so that is the idea that everybody can rally around and go back to, and you can connect to people in an emotional way that way. And it's separate from your positioning, which we'll talk about next, but it's even separate from what you're trying to do from a business metrics standpoint. It is, why are we here in the first place? That's the first part of it. The second part is the positioning, and this is a lot more tactical, which is how are we distinct? What challenges are we solving? Why are we compelling compared to competitors and things like that? So this is more about things like segmentation. So if you think about Nest thermostats, when they came around, they created the entire learning thermostat category. They took a boring old product that the dads would yell at you about for adjusting. I know my dad was always like, don't touch the thermostat. So they took that boring old product and they added the word learning in front of it, and they created an entire category that automatically positioned themselves as different. And now there's an entire aisle at Lowe's or Home Depot of learning thermostats, but Nest was the first one. And they positioned themselves as one of the first smart connected IoT products. If you think about Volvo compared to other cars, they're all about safety. Honda's about reliability, Ferrari's about performance and sexiness, but Volvo is about safety. If I'm not mistaken, they invented the seatbelt. And rather than patenting it, they said, no, we think seatbelts should be in every car. So we're just going to give that open source technology around. And they're still about that today. If you think about a company like Vans, which I love, the shoe company, they can't compete with Adidas or Nike on athletics, but what they compete on is the sort of, not countercultural, but the offbeat, their whole slogan, off the wall, the sort of not athletic, but still, I don't even know, skateboarding culture, I guess, for lack of a better word, but that positions themselves as far as your tennis shoe market, apart from Nike or Adidas or Puma or any of these other things. So that's positioning. And then the last thing is personality, which is all about how do you speak, how do you sound to other people? The old classic, if your brand was a person, what would it be? Which is kind of true in some ways, which there is no brand as a person. It's really more about tone of voice, your language, and how you use it. So a company like Headspace is very calm and soothing. They say things like, be kind to your mind. It's very mindful and it fits with their brand perfectly. If you think about a company like Masterclass, which is the online thing where you can take a class from Samuel L. Jackson or whatever, they're very motivational. So they say things like, today's the day, or do the thing, or things like that. There's a company called Tend, which is an online banking sort of money transfer platform, and they'll be more punny. So they'll say things like pays well with others, which is fun because it ties back to what their product does, but it's also a super fun tone of voice that's going to connect with people. Or you have things like Slack, which says make work life simpler, which is very straightforward and business-like, but it's also kind of casual. So how you speak is just as important as what you're saying. And so once you've got your positioning figured out, once you've got your messaging figured out, then you need to figure out what's your personality and how do you actually say it? And you can say the same thing in a myriad of ways. So for us, those are the three things that we look at first. So if we're working with a brand new startup, the minimum thing we want to come away with from a strategy phase is what's your purpose, what's your positioning, what's your personality? And from there, it all branches out. And so the exercise that I wanted to walk through as an example of a tool that we've used to come up with the highest level of that, which is the purpose, which then trickles down to all the rest, is this framework called the Big Ideal, which was created by Ogilvy a handful of years ago. And I've got a PDF, which it doesn't look like you can download from the site anymore, but Karen and Nicole, I'll share it with you. And if you want to send it around to everybody, there's a pretty good white paper that they've done that walks you through it, which everything in here I've pulled from that. So this is a good high level overview, but the whole thing hinges on this premise that the brands we admire are not just built on big ideas, but they're on big ideals. And so they all stand for something. They have an ideal, they have a vision, they have something that they are idealistic about. And that is what connects to people. And as vital as the ideas are, the things that the brands that are on big ideals, like Patagonia, like Nike, like Vans, those are the ones that compel people to buy their products. They engage with people, and everything comes back to that as far as the values. And importantly, this last line, they appear to be driven by something simply beyond the next set of numbers. And then to harp on Patagonia and keep picking on them, but their numbers went up during the Great Recession in 2008 because of their ideals. And when everybody else was having to downsize and things like that, Patagonia, I think, grew by 25% because of their ideals and because people wanted to support a company they believed in, and also because they had great products and people were figuring, if we're going to spend money, we might as well buy something that's going to last a long time. But the ideal is what brought them in the first place. So this is the crux of the whole thing. This little fill in the blank sentence. Blank believes the world would be a better place if blank, which is super simple, but shockingly hard to fill in. And you can, as you can imagine, you can spend a ton of time. The first one's easy. It's the name of your company. I'll give you that one. But the second one, the second blank, is a lot harder. So for us, for our company, Nonfiction, we believe the world would be a better place if things were simpler and smarter and more sustainable. That's what our big ideal is. And the whole thing is built on this Venn diagram of the big ideal in the middle. On the left, you've got some sort of cultural tension. What is happening now in the greater culture in the world that you see as an issue? And on the right side, what are you bringing to the table? What is the best version of your brand, your product, whatever? And then when those overlap, when those intersect, that's where you start to pull the big ideal out. I see a chat. Thanks, Karen. So what does this actually look like? That's cool, but how does this actually work? So let's look at a company like Dove. Dove's in the middle. This goes back to that campaign they had a few years ago. The culture issue was beauty anxiety in the age of Photoshop. Everything's Photoshop, nothing is real. Everybody is self-conscious about their bodies because of what they're seeing in ads and on TV. And Dove has this gentle alternative to soap that delivers real care. So if you put those two things together, For Dove, the world would be a better place if women were allowed to feel good about their bodies. And so that is the big ideal that everything is hinged on. And that's how they came up with that campaign, where people would see drawings of themselves and they would see themselves transformed and see themselves for how they really were. Another example, this is a company we worked on called Oculi that makes radar software for radar devices for autonomous vehicles, for AI, for drones, that sort of thing. So we've got this huge rise of autonomous systems. Everything is getting radar chips in it, from your car to little robots that will bring you lunch on campus at OSU, to drones, to forklifts in warehouses, that sort of thing. What Oculi is able to do is make smarter, smaller, cheaper radar. And when you put those two things together, for Oculi, the world would be a better place if all kinds of transportation were smarter, safer, faster. And so they're making that possible by all of the technology they're doing. But what it is about is, as the world goes toward an autonomous future, it's got to be smarter and safer and faster. So the other important part of this, and the reason it's so simple, and the reason it's important to get it down to that one sentence, is that that is super easy to articulate. You sit down next to somebody in a bar, you sit down next to somebody at a trade show, on a bus, you have a business lunch, the classic example of bumping into somebody in an elevator. I have never given an elevator pitch in an elevator. I don't know anybody that has, so I don't know who's ever done that, but I suppose someone has at some point. It's not just some piece of brand mumbo jumbo jargon. This is something that you could easily just ramble off. Nonfiction believes the world would be a better place if it was simpler, smarter, and more sustainable. It's natural, and it easily articulates what you're trying to do. And that's the power of this. And then all of those things we talked about, a rallying cry internally, a script to get everybody on the same page externally, it becomes really, really easy to do. Okay, so a couple of tools here. And I realize this is a PDF, so nobody can click on any of this, but I'll share these out, and we can make sure everybody has access to these. The Big Ideal PDF, we'll get that out. It's a really great read. It's got how to do this exercise with your team in there. It's got a few other things. There's a great link that I believe is already on the website that Karen mentioned, but this is from First Round Capital about building a brand that matters. And there's a really great marketing manager out there named Ariel Jackson that has written some really great articles about branding. This is one of them. There's a great book I really recommend called Decoded: The Science Behind Why We Buy, which is very research driven and academic in some ways, but in the right ways, as far as the psychology around drivers of people and how they interact with brands. I've gotten a lot out of that one as well. And then the last one, as far as personality goes, there's a great newsletter called Tone Knob, which is written by a writer out of the UK that I think about once a month. It started 3, 4, or 5 months ago. I think once a month he features a different brand and says, here's their voice and here's why I love it. So he's featured everything from a toilet paper company called Who Gives a Crap, to a brand called Oatly, which makes oat milk, to the CIA, which has an interesting brand voice. And so that's a really interesting one if you're looking for examples or want to understand how brand voice works from an expert. That's one I subscribe to that's really great too. So yeah, sorry, the last one's not on there because I added it this morning. I'll get you a link to that, Karen. So that's what I've got. The rest of the time, let's just have a discussion about what's on anybody's mind, and I'll happy to answer any questions or pitch in however I can to help anybody out.